Hello, my name's Barnett Gilmer. I'm owner, CEO of Gulf Breeze Recovery. And today we have a special guest with us, Joe Bailey. And I'll let him introduce himself.
Hello, my name is Joe Bailey, and this is a topic near and dear to me. My training is as a clinical psychologist and family therapist, but like most people in America, we all are touched by addiction in one way or another. And I grew up in a family with many alcoholics and people with drug addiction, and so firsthand I consciously or unconsciously got into this field to help people because we're all affected. All of us are affected by addiction, and not just the person with the addiction, but the people around it. So much of my career has been spent trying to bring the need for the family to be worked with while the addict is in treatment, and that the family gets treatment alongside the addict while they're in treatment. And so that's my passion. I'm thrilled and excited to be part of Gulf Breeze, which has such an important family component to the treatment.
Thank you. And what we decided to do today is something a little different. We decided that we would compile some of the most frequently asked questions that family members ask us. And so I actually have it written down here. And so, in the context of a family member who has a loved one who's in active addiction right now, one of the questions would be, how can we be more supportive of our family member and honor their own feelings, of anger, mistrust, that kind of thing that they have, for the person who's out there actively using?
Well, I think it's really important to acknowledge that the person driving the bus isn't the only person that's injured when the bus collides. And with an addict, their lives, of course, is severely affected physically, spiritually, emotionally, in many ways. But there's a lot of collateral damage, so to speak, because everyone that's affected by that alcoholic, whether it's the spouse, the children, other family members, the employer, friends, people are disappointed, they've lost trust, they have feelings of resentment and anger. They have a lot of emotions, and it's really important that you acknowledge that as a family member, that you too need help, that you if the addict gets well, that doesn't mean all the problems are over. We have to heal too as family members. We have to be able to discover our own health, because we found ways to cope with that addiction, some of which are very dysfunctional and can lead to other mental health issues or emotional problems, or even other people in the family becoming addicts themselves. So it's really important, I think, that you see this opportunity with your loved one going through treatment, or thinking of sending someone to treatment, that you seek help for yourself as well and get involved in the family program.
That kind of brings to mind that when a person is dealing, if you will, with a loved one in active addiction, typically the primary focus is on the person who's actively using, and it's probably a little unusual maybe for some people that to turn the focus maybe back on themselves and their need to heal, and to be able to have their own health, if you will, and pay attention to their own health. Another question that we have is that I know I'm an enabler. How do I stop enabling my loved one? And how do I do it without them hating me?
Well, I think when we're in a relationship with someone who has an active addiction, we're just trying to survive. We're doing the best we can, and innocently we do things that, even with the best of intentions, actually further enable the addict to continue in their addiction, because we want to prevent the damage. And so if we can just appease them, or not make such a big deal about it, we think that maybe it'll go away. But that's part of the denial system of the whole family. We want to minimize the problem, because if we admit the truth, it's really painful to see that truth. We have to do something about it then. So you want to, first of all, forgive yourself as a family member. You don't want to judge yourself for having developed bad habits, just like the addict is looking outside of themselves for a way to gain stress relief, or to lower their insecurity levels, or cover up their feelings. That's the best that they've been able to find to cope with their unhappiness. And the same is true for the family member. It might be that you get a secondary gain out of being a rescuer or trying to save the person. And many of us in our profession come from families with addiction because we're so used to being in the role of rescuer or fixer. And that can be very true for family members. But every person in the family finds different ways. Some people withdraw into isolation as a way of avoiding conflict. Other people draw fire by becoming even more outlandish than the addict, maybe getting in trouble with the law, and that person is kind of the person in the family you might call the rebel, and it's a way of drawing fire away from the alcoholic often. But there's the way that the alcoholism, the addiction is sustained is through secrecy, through denial, through people trying to cope the best they can. So just even getting information about the family, what the role the family plays in addiction, kind of the family illness in a sense, and just beginning, maybe going to a support group or other means to educate yourself about what do I have to learn here, but to see that the healthier you get, the more able that you're going to be able to deal with that person once they come out of treatment or begin recovery. And even if they're not in recovery yet, don't wait for them to get well for you to get well. The best thing you can do for an addict is to find your own health, to take care of your own mental health. The healthier you get, the more that inspires or kind of puts pressure on the addict to recognize their own illness, their own need for help. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. And it's funny because it seems like there's a common thread here, already with just these two questions, and that is your own health. That's interesting. So the next scenario, if you will, is those who have a family member that's in treatment, right now. And so one of the questions, my family member has been spending money, doing what they want, and now the family, us, we have to spend money for treatment. And it just seems like that, that the person that's been out using is getting all the attention. Now they're being cared for at a treatment center. And the family that's left behind is having to deal with the wreckage, if you will, of their using. And so don't I have a right to be angry? To be sick and tired of what's been going on? What about me, if you will?
Well, it's perfectly normal that people in that exact scenario you just described, where the addict goes to treatment, they're in the treatment center, and I'm left at home, kind of picking up the pieces. The hurt feelings with the children or with the bills or, paying for the treatment. And so it's completely understand that you would have the whole gamut of feelings. Part of you might be relieved they're not around, and you might even feel guilty about that, because there they are off in treatment. It's so much better without them here. Or to the feeling of extreme resentment or anger that, why do I have to go through this? How long, I don't know if I can ever forgive him or her for what they've done to me. But that again underlies the importance of each of us getting help in the family, that we all have to have a healing process of forgiveness of the addict and forgiveness of ourselves. And one of the things that I teach people who are family members is the importance of seeing past that addiction that's kind of covered up who the real person is, to the heart of what they fell in love with in the first place. That person that was buried in there underneath the addiction, that has all that potential to be kind of renewed or be born again. And that's what you ultimately want to be able to see, But at the same time, like the people I work with, I encourage them to get their own counseling to help them work through their feelings of resentment and unforgiveness of the addict, and their guilt themselves and what role they may have played in it by enabling, by being judgmental, by withdrawing, by threatening divorce, or all kinds of things that people do. So you first have to see your own innocence and the innocence of the addict. And then that begins the process of forgiveness for the family, which is something that doesn't happen with the snap of the fingers. It's something that you have to be willing to do and get help in doing, and acknowledge your feelings. But you don't want to hang on to those feelings, because the longer you hang on to resentment or guilt, the more that holds down your own well-being, your health. And in order for full recovery to happen, the whole family system needs to get help and get their health back.
It sounds like that, it's okay to have that feeling of resentment or whatever it may be, being sick and tired of what's happened, and obviously resenting that you're having to pick up the pieces. But there is a time to move beyond it and to look at the person for what maybe he or she really is, instead of just a person with an addiction.
Yeah. And I think it's hard too, Barnett, for people to let go of those memories when maybe the person comes back from treatment and now they're all happy and they're grateful and they're all enthusiastic about their recovery, and all you can see is the old person before treatment. And you want to give yourself permission to take time to rebuild trust, to begin to see the person anew and with new eyes, and to see that help. Because it is very encouraging for the addict to be given a second chance, to be given an opportunity to succeed, rather than looking at him as, oh, here we go again, this is never going to work, and that's not going to help them and supporting them. But at the same time, you are a human being, and you have these feelings, and you have to acknowledge them, and it may be helpful to share those with other people in a support group, or with a counselor, or with a counselor even on the staff at Gulf Breeze, because we do make available sessions for significant others in the family.
Yeah, we often will tell people that you've earned the right to feel that way. But
well said.
Yeah. So the next scenario is, of course, when the loved one comes home from treatment, and I know you just touched on that a little bit, but and this kind of goes back to a little bit of what you said, that I am so distrustful right now, and how can we ever build trust again, after everything that's happened? How do we do that?
Well, I think it starts with first being honest and acknowledging where you are at this point. At this point, I don't trust you. I'm going to have to see if things have changed. I want to trust you. I'm willing to trust you. But it may take me some time. I know you're all enthusiastic about coming out of treatment and you've got this, but I need to catch up. And so it's really important that you first be honest with yourself about what your real feelings are. Be honest with the other person, but also open your mind to the possibility that you may see the person differently, that you may be able to move on. People move on and have very healthy relationships after treatment, and when people are in recovery. It may be that their relationship is better than it's ever been, even before they developed a problem with the addiction. Because most of us don't really learn how life works and how we create our experience, and a lot of what your loved one will learn in treatment is just like an owner's manual for how to have a nice life. And most of us, develop addiction because we don't have a nice life. We're just stressed or struggling or barely surviving, and that's a coping mechanism. It becomes a coping mechanism for a miserable life. But in treatment at Gulf Breeze, you're learning to not just take away the drug or alcohol, but you're learning to rebuild a life that is fulfilling, has purpose, has joy and happiness. So you as a family member need to come along on that journey, and it just takes honesty, openness, and willingness to change, and willingness to receive help.
And another that concerns that topic is, how do I hold my loved one accountable while acknowledging, the progress, and I guess without being maybe too restrictive or something, but how do we do that?
Well, one of the things that happens in addiction is that there are really poor boundaries in the family. People don't set limits, they're not honest, they're not truthful, they pretend to be everything is okay when it isn't, or they overreact. They become extremely angry or resentful. And so they don't know how to set a boundary in a healthy way. And so it's really important that not only the family members learn to set clear boundaries, but also the addict. And what that means is being honest and truthful about what's acceptable or what is unacceptable, but more from a state of neutrality. Because as soon as we add judgment and resentment and all those built up feelings that come up in a person while setting a limit, can get way more attention than the fact of what the limit that you're trying to set, or the accountability that you're trying to give the person who's been involved in addiction. So honesty with compassion, neutrality, and resolve are the key elements to setting clear boundaries and being honest and holding that person accountable. For I think that the no talk rule is the most powerful toxin in the addictive family. Is that nobody can talk about the problem. Nobody can be honest about their real feelings, about the relationship. But when you find your bearings, when you get your mental health back, when you get in your own recovery as a family member, you're going to have the strength and the courage to be honest without judgmental, honest without unloading a dump load full of resentments. There's a time and place to do that with a counselor working through it to help you with that. But as you go forward in your life, you want to build on a feeling of love, forgiveness, and compassion, and honesty. Those are the elements that will break that no-talk rule in a family, and the secrets. The children are really affected by this. Just a close family member who suffered, his wife suffered from an addiction. I had a meeting with all the kids not too long ago and asked them, what was it like for you growing up? Well, we could just never talk about it. We were always protecting, we didn't want anybody to know about Mom and her alcoholism. And so we weren't sure who we could talk to and who we couldn't. And Dad was very controlling, and that was his coping mechanism. He was very controlling over what all the kids said or did, and everybody else had to be perfect, more perfect because of the alcoholism. So it was kind of to compensate. So when families get healthy, they can be free to be truthful about the past, about the present, and about the future going forward. And they can speak honestly what their wants, needs, and desires are, versus not wanting to rock the boat, walking on eggshells, which happens in the addictive family. People are afraid of telling the truth. Dad might blow up, or he got drunk and beat us, or Mom will, or it's a very volatile situation to live in a family with addiction. So it's gonna take some time. This isn't going to happen just because the person went through treatment. Recovery is an ongoing process of setbacks and going forward and setting back, and so it's not just all one straight line. It's a gradual process of getting your health back. And for many people, they've never really many people who become alcoholic grew up in alcoholic homes or addictive homes, so they've never really known a healthy family. They don't even know what it's like, and that's part of what we hope to get across. And while they're at Gulf Breeze and in treatment, is what does it mean to have a healthy relationship? What does it mean to have honest communication? These are all things that once the addiction is dealt with, there's many other things to discover about living life effectively.
it sounds like, the addiction basically is almost all encompassing, if you will, of a family's life. I mean, everything revolves around that almost, and trying to protect the family, maybe protect their loved one who is in active addiction. And so that's what I sometimes like to say, the abnormal has become normal. And then once a person in treatment and they're doing fairly well, then a lot of times the family almost doesn't know how to respond and act because it's foreign to them. Now this addiction is not so much the nucleus anymore. And how do we act in a healthy manner?
That was a full-time job.
Yeah.
Now what do we do?
Yeah.
We've been fired from our job of taking care of the addict or taking care of the dynamics of it. And so it throws the whole equilibrium of the family off. And it can feel very awkward and uncomfortable and unpredictable. With addiction, oftentimes what happens in families is people almost get the person to drink again to get back to what they're familiar with. So it's a great point that you bring up. We don't really know what it's like to live in a healthy family environment. And a lot of people get secondary gain out of being in an addicted family. They become the martyr, they become the enabler, the fixer, the feelings of superiority and judgment towards the addict for being inferior. Sometimes it's the reverse. The addict feels superior and everyone else feels inferior. But it's all out of balance. And so, but it's a balance that they've become familiar with, familiar pathology. And so it really requires a whole re-education of what does a healthy family even look like? What is a healthy relationship? People don't often know what that even feels like. So that's why aftercare is so imperative and so important for the ongoing healing of the family and the ongoing recovery of the addict at the same time. Because we're all addicted to something. Could be addicted to worrying about the alcoholic, could be addicted to a drug or alcohol, could be addicted to being perfect, being super successful and better than everybody so that it makes up for the alcoholic or the addict in the family. People find different ways of trying to, it's almost like these mobiles that you see on babies' cribs. You move one piece, the whole thing shifts. So when the addict gets healthy, the whole system has to shift, and it has to find a new balance. So it's an exciting possibility that you can fully recover from addiction, but it doesn't mean that it's just the addict that has to change. We're all in this together. It's a family affair, and we're all part of the solution, and we're all part of the problem. So it's an important thing, I think, for people to realize.
Yeah. And I think for the most part, that is a problem that most family members are really blind to, that they really don't see it, which is an innocent thing. And so another question that we usually get is, my loved one is exhibiting secretive, manipulative behaviors, which remind me, of him or her using. And how do I address what I'm noticing, through these behaviors, if you will, without him or her getting defensive, without us, getting into an argument or whatever.
Well, you can't control how the other person is going to react, number one. You could say it perfectly, and the other person could still get defensive or overreact. But probably the best approach is to, again, be honest with what you're feeling and acknowledge that this may be me not trusting you, dear, again, yet, but I'm feeling really suspicious, and I might need to be reminded, or you may need to show me that you can be trusted again. So if I'm questioning it doesn't mean I don't believe in what you are saying, but I'm not there yet. I'm going to need some time. So you just want to respect yourself and acknowledge that it's going to take some time for you to heal too, and let your partner know that has gone through treatment. I want to be able to trust you again. I care about you, but I've been promised a lot, and I've been let down, and I don't want to be let down again. And I know you can't promise me that, but I know that if we can have an honest conversation, we can be open about this, we'll work through this together. That's kind of what I would recommend. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'll say that it reminds me also of a time when we had a guest who graduated, and his wife was very apprehensive and and not trusting, which she's earned that right. And she confronted him on something, and she just felt insecure, that maybe he was drinking again. And the one thing that he said to her was that, honey, I'm not, but what can I do to help you to maybe see that, I'm not, that I'm doing the right thing. And just with him being open to her, and with her being open and honest to him about her feelings and stuff, they worked through it. Mm-hmm. And it worked out really well. And I can happy to say that he's been clean for over 6 years, which is great. But it's the one overall theme I would say to this that you just mentioned over and over again is the honesty, the openness, that a person has to have, and not to bottle things up and to just keep quiet and start being suspicious, and all that kind of stuff, but just let it out. And I feel this way, and just let it out. Mm-hmm. And but that's, to me, seems to be the overriding theme.
Well, I think that's part of it, and the other half of that is to recognize that whatever you're feeling is coming from how you're thinking and perceiving things.
Yeah.
And so acknowledging that this could be my thinking. I don't know whether to trust my thinking or not at this point. So it's a gradual process of honest communication, holding people accountable, keeping hope, believing in the health of the other person, that they're capable of recovery, and you are capable of healing. But you can't pretend it. You can't fake it. It has to be sincere. And so if you're not feeling that, in acknowledging it, it can be very freeing. I really don't trust you. I've earned it. It's been years since I've been able to trust you, and I know you're feeling so much better after treatment, and you feel like you're a brand new person. But I haven't been around you for the last 8 weeks. I haven't seen all those changes, and I hope to, and I will, and I want you to succeed. But you got to give me a chance to come along. So that someone who's gone through treatment, hearing that, is going to be very, I think, compassionate for that person, and do what they need to do. I've had people say, okay, if they've been unfaithful, for example, this happens a lot in addiction. There's infidelity, and my texting is open to you. You can go through it anytime you want. Blah blah blah. Just until that trust is there. So you got to find your own way. Every family's going to be different. Every relationship's going to be different. But when you find your own health, and you're operating from your own health, you're not afraid of the truth, and you're not afraid to communicate honestly.
That's great. Well, I'd like to thank you, Joe.
No other questions? That's it, huh?
That's it. Yep.
Okay. Well,
Yeah. No,
well, I'm
that's
sure people have a lot more questions, but
sure.
they can certainly call you and ask you for those.
Yeah. That's another show. We'll wrap it up, and I'd like to once again thank Joe for coming in and shedding some insight on this important topic.
And thank you for listening.